This is the DocNation Podcast. We are a movement founded by doctors, for doctors, dedicated to empowering medical professionals to reclaim control over healthcare decisions and advocating for their fair share of the industry's resources. Please note, the views expressed are those of DocNation and not necessarily those of our guests or referenced health centers. Well, welcome back to another episode of the DocNation Podcast. We're excited to have Dr. Rashmee Patil on with us. And before we get into the conversation, we want to touch base on what DocNation is doing. We are in an era where so much control and so much influence has been stripped away from physicians that you have unlicensed, untrained people who have never treated patients before calling the shots in healthcare. And so we exist to make it possible for physicians to get back in charge, for doctors to have more decision-making authority. And we're in a tough spot with what's happened with the 10 administrators for one physician now. When it used to be 5 physicians for every one administrator, it's been a huge change. And so we strongly believe that the ones who should be calling the shots and making the decisions are the ones who went through medical school, who went through residency and fellowship, and who actually provide care to patients, and not these big insurance, drug companies, and the big health systems that really don't have the qualifications to provide the care to the patient. And so it's a big concern. We're consumers of healthcare ourselves, and we care about what we receive from our providers, our physicians. And so we want to see patients get more time with their physician. And so DocNation exists to advocate for you, the patient, for you, the physician, and to make sure that you get that time with the patient that you need, and that the care can improve. We're spending way too much money on healthcare today, and the results globally, I guess on a global scale for our country, are not where they should be. And so we intend to make a difference with that. And it's fun having these kind of conversations, to talk with leaders who don't fit the mold or don't go down the traditional path. And so Dr. Patil is a board certified internist and hepatologist. She's the CMO of Pinnacle Clinical Research. She founded the South Texas Research Institute to expand clinical trial access in underserved communities, and has led over 100 studies on liver disease, including NAFLD and NASH. She's a frequent contributor to top medical journals. She is a national leader in advancing care and equity in metabolic liver disease research. She's not just an outside of the box thinker, but also a doer. And that's one of the things we look forward to having her share her story with us today. And so, Dr. Patil, tell us about the unconventional path that you took.
Whoa. She's
Wow.
she's also an ex D1 athlete. Come on now.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes, you left that very important fact out.
Yes. All right. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. I really appreciate it. And just to give your listeners a little bit of a, sort of like a backdrop to how we met and interacted. I think I've been on this path now, kind of a non-traditional path, for a while. And, I think through serendipity kind of met as I was looking to start a new venture. But I'll go back to the beginning. So as you said, I'm a hepatologist by training. I have a real passion for liver disease, and I did internal medicine training. And then I worked for a while as a hospitalist, spent some time, trying to really decide what I wanted to do, and then eventually pursued a fellowship in hepatology and liver transplantation at Baylor in Houston. And I'm a Texan, so I had spent a lot of time away from Texas, but came back to Texas to finish my training. And then in about 2017, I was called by a couple of hepatobiliary surgeons who wanted to start a liver transplant program in South Texas, which is where I am now. And it was really an interesting opportunity. I mean, I wanted to go where I was needed, which is part of I'm sort of cut from that cloth. I want to go where I'm needed. And so I took the leap of faith, and I went to an area that is very underserved, that didn't have a single hepatologist really, and started to build up a practice, and got a lot of good hands-on clinical experience.
Was that a hard decision to make, to go there?
Yeah, I think it was hard because I had gone from, I did my training in Brooklyn, New York. So I went from Brooklyn, New York to Houston, Texas, the medical center in Houston, Texas, and then to, very South Texas, which is a much smaller community. It's just like a much smaller medical community, probably 90% Hispanic. So, patients here are just different, socioeconomically depressed, don't have access to a lot of things. And there wasn't the liver transplant program here. So most hepatologists follow an academic route. So they go to work at a transplant program, and they're in a big academic system. So this was kind of me starting something from scratch, which was very intimidating. But I was interested, like I wanted to sort of see what would happen. And so, yes, it was hard, but I did it. And so came here, worked building up a general practice for about 2 years. And at that same time, I was introduced to my mentor, who really opened my eyes to drug development and to sort of like the commercial side of medicine. So something that we're not really privy to as physicians in our medical training and even post-medical training. So I built up a clinical research program in the hospital system where I was working, and it was focused all on a progressive form of fatty liver disease called MASH. And it just blew up. Like it became very successful very quickly. We got a lot of studies, we enrolled a lot of patients, and then I started to have to answer the question, okay, what do I like doing more? Traditional clinical practice or clinical research? And it became sort of a tug of war. So I had to choose one over the other. And unfortunately, not every hospital system that you work in is going to see eye to eye with you, right? They sometimes can't see the vision. And so I decided, because I was being pulled in different directions, that I wanted to focus 100% on research. And I left the hospital system and started my own clinical research site business. That was around 2020. And if you recall, in 2020, we had a small thing called COVID-19 happening.
Great year to kick off.
A global pandemic was around the corner. So we opened the doors April 1st, actually April Fool's of 2020. And I thought to myself at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, like I think this is going to fail. Like I think I just risked, my career maybe, and took on a little bit of financial risk, and what's going to happen. By the grace of God, or whatever you want to call it, we actually did very well. And during the pandemic, we actually grew. So we brought on a lot of clinical trials. We started with 5 individuals in our initial location. And then by the time we had been around for about 2 years, we had grown from 5 people to 30 people, 1 location to 2 locations. And, just really, really it was a success story. I mean, and so, around 2022, the end of 2022, I ended up actually partnering with a larger clinical research site business called Pinnacle Clinical Research. They are leaders in liver disease research, and now we're moving into other areas, but partnered with them and came on as the CEO of the combined business. So now I'm going from 2 site locations to 5 site locations in Texas. I'm overseeing that growing business. And, over the past, I would say since end of 2022 until now, we have grown from, 5 site locations to 16.
Ooh.
And we are geographically spread out in Texas, Nevada, and New Jersey, with the appetite to continue to grow. So now I've changed roles. I'm in the role of chief medical officer, but still, I mean, it's a huge it's a huge role and a growing company. So it's been really exciting, very very interesting, a very steep learning curve for me. I don't have an MBA. I've never taken a business class before.
Did that hold you back? Did that prevent you from being able to do what you wanted or needed to do?
Or did it slow things down?
I think that you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I think there was a little bit of naivete at the beginning, like, which is kind of good in a way, because I think when you don't know what you don't know, you don't fall into this analysis paralysis sort of trap, which a lot of physicians, because we're just like very cognitive and we love data points and we love all this, like we want everything, we need to know everything before we go take a leap of faith. So I think it was a blessing that I didn't have an MBA, or that I wasn't doing, a ton of
Really?
because really I had already proven to myself that this was a calculated risk. I had built a program.
I see.
Yep. I had built a program at the.
You got a real life MBA. You got a real life.
Yeah, yeah. I had already built a program within the hospital system, so I knew. Yeah, I knew what the contracts looked like. I knew, what sort of revenue was coming in. I knew the overhead, generally how many people were needed, and I knew that I could do it. Right. I just and I don't want to discount. I had some really great mentors. And I had people who were supporting me, kind of pushing me to make that decision. And I think that's a really big part of it, is just, you kind of need that, you need people behind you, or maybe who have taken that path before, to sort of tell you, hey, this is, you're going to see success on the other side of this. Excuse me. And I had that. So I was really lucky to have that.
How much did your medical school residency and fellowship equip you to do these things that you've done that are not the typical W-2, take a contract and work for 1, 2, 3 years in a job somewhere in a hospital?
That's a good question. I think being a doctor in general, I think that, we understand what it means to have resilience, what it means to have stick-to-itiveness, like what it means to really grind it out, right? Like, I mean, there were times during my medical residency where I wanted to quit. Like it was just very hard. And I think that when you go through, like, everything seems easy compared to what we do, like what we've done in our training, like spent decades training and dealing with life and death, like it, once you go into business, you're sort of like, okay, like, these decisions, yes, they're hard, and you're making thousands of them over the week, but they pale in comparison to the decisions you're making in your medical training and in medical practice, in terms of the, a lot of the consequences, right? So I felt like I had the confidence, even though I didn't know everything, that I could learn as well. So I think there's always a curiosity, and I think doctors are just, a lot of clinicians that I know are just they're very curious, and they are very smart, and they have an insatiable, like, want and need to keep learning and keep growing. So if you don't know it, you'll figure it out. Like, you'll find out what you need to know.
So it's almost like the boot camp that you go through equipped you enough, not necessarily for those 1,000 decisions you're making in a week, but
on the business side,
as far as like the specific decisions, but being able to weather the storm. It's almost as if it's a training ground to make it possible to be on the other side and be in a different environment, but still be able to move forward. Because I think fear is the #1 cancer in the world, and people fear what they don't know or they don't understand. And so it holds people back from pursuing sometimes their dreams, and their dreams just stay dreams. They never stay, they never turn into a reality because they're too afraid to try. But you did. And it sounds like you you don't regret doing that. It was
Well,
No.
I'm so thankful
turned out
that she
good.
said, I think this is the most important thing in the podcast, to be honest with you. And maybe this is selfishly towards DocNation, but we have a powerhouse in the medical field, and we have a powerhouse businesswoman saying that the business decisions are super, super doable. And it takes a little bit of courage, but they pale in comparison to the severity of decisions you're making in medicine with dealing
Life
with
and
life
death.
and death. And so for all of our listeners, I think that's a really key point to understand that, because we have a lot of listeners who are on the fence. I want to leave the W-2 hospital, but there's going to be a period of time where I'm not making money. There's going to be a period of time where I'm not doing what I went to school to do, and that just feels super, super weird, and I don't know what to do about it. We have someone here who started a business on April Fool's Day during a pandemic. And so if that gives you any courage, I think if that doesn't give you the courage you need, then I think that you probably should stay
Right.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Rashmee.
Yeah, of course. So, I think in retrospect, Justin, you asked, did I regret it? No, I think that by being a little bit courageous and maybe taking the path less traveled, and trying to figure out, is this going to work or not? I always knew I could go back to traditional practice if it failed, right? I mean, that's the beauty of also being a doctor, is that you have many options. Once you have your MD and you've been through residency, fellowship training, I mean, you have so many options. So I don't regret it at all, and it's opened up so many more doors. And I have seen the other side also of medicine, right? So the commercial drug development side of medicine is really exciting and interesting. And it's sort of the intersection between, being really innovative and talking about the science and sort of the cutting edge things that are done in drug development, but also still being able to see how that impacts how a patient feels, functions, and survives. And, you get kind of the best of both worlds. So, and, because I'm the CMO, I interview a lot of clinicians. So a lot of other, what we call them, principal investigators, but these are physicians who take on the lead role in the trial, at the clinical research site. They oversee patient safety. They're involved in how the site runs. And they come from all specialties. They come from all age groups. And many of them are looking into this route because they are tired of the traditional, like, seeing 40 patients a day, not having the satisfaction that they want, feeling completely burned out. And they want the optionality to find more fulfillment and satisfaction, which they can in clinical research. And so I see the trepidation. I think one of you had mentioned, oh my gosh, like, I'm leaving the traditional medicine path, and I don't, I'm not seeing patients in the clinic the way I'm used to. So I see that trepidation for sure. But there are ways to balance it to keep your, you get to keep your license, current. You want to stay up to date with CME and with your board certification and all of that. But you could still do a ton of different things with your medical training. So, so that's kind of the message that I also want to give to clinicians, is that clinical research is a really interesting way of maybe finding satisfaction that you've lost, and really physicians need to be more involved in clinical research, because we have a lack of investigators, and we have a ton of patients who suffer from whatever disease state, but they are kind of siloed into community practices or maybe healthcare systems, but in the community, and they're not getting access to clinical trials because not enough physicians are participating.
We talked about that before, didn't we? How it's less than 10%?
Yeah, so
Physicians,
it's
maybe?
definitely, I think it's definitely less than 10%. I don't know the exact stat, but there's this idea that the majority of physicians who also become a principal investigator they tend to be like a one and done type of scenario. So they come, they do one study, and then they're done. They're like, this is not for me. So I think it's a combination. It's that maybe a lot of clinicians don't know that this is a route that they can take, but also that once they get into it and they become a principal investigator, they're exposed to clinical research, that they don't like it. They're sort of like, no, this is just too much, too different from what I'm doing. And so what I can say is that if it's done the right way and you're exposed to it the right way, most people want to continue. So the physicians that we have at Pinnacle who do clinical research, they never want to leave. They're like, we're never going back. So
one of the things that we talk about often is how rampant depression, anxiety, and stress is with burnout among clinicians. And it's crazy how many medical students are on antidepressants and stimulants. It's like 75%. And if you go and study psychology, you look at what causes people to struggle, and there's just like this recurrent theme of not having autonomy, not having decision-making authority, not having control. Lack of control is people feel helpless. And we hear it every week from physicians all across the country. They don't have control. And here you are, where you went through an initial phase and then like an in-between phase and some different steps that you went through. What happened for you where you saw maybe some lack of control and then the opportunity to have more control? And what did that do for you?
So I think that not everyone has an entrepreneurial cap that they can access. And I want to be very transparent about that. Like not every physician is going to be wanting to be entrepreneurial, but like those that are and have that little ember, that little like start of a fire in them, like they once they get access to it, there's no going back. So what happened for me was I had always, I had the example of my father who owned his own practice, and he spent so much time with me as a kid. He could take off whenever he wanted. He was my coach, in my tennis, my junior career. He coached me, went on trips with me all the time. But he told me all the time, like, I can do this because I own my business. Like I own my time. Like I can do what I want when I want. And so I always kind of had that in my mind. So he had kind of
plant the seed.
Yeah, he had planted the seed, right? So once I started getting into, the hospital system, the W-2 work, and it was fine. But once I had an idea that, hey, look, I think I can take this and do it on my own, then there was sort of no going back from there. I think that, I love the autonomy. I absolutely loved being, a business owner. And I personally, I really don't ever want to be in a situation again in my life where, I can't control, a lot of the decisions that are being made, or that I can't see that the decisions that I'm making are having a true impact. And so much of that is, you're right, it comes with having a seat at the table. And so the more bloated that healthcare has gotten over time, right, it's just the more of a gap between the clinicians actually doing the work and the decisions being made for the corporation or whatever. I mean, there's just, those clinicians are not being involved in the decision making. And so in clinical research, I think it's really important, because this is an industry that it's different, right? There is some consolidation happening for sure, and it's happening quickly, but clinicians are very much at the forefront of a lot of the decision making at Pinnacle for sure. But in general, many physicians own their own sites. And you have to be a principal investigator, you have to be a physician. Like you can't circle around that right now. So pharmaceutical companies, are not going to for the most part, bring on a nurse practitioner or a PA, even if they're very well versed in the disease state. They want physicians, and physicians have a lot of say, in how clinical trials are executed. So I think it's refreshing, I think, for physicians to come into clinical trials right now.
Rashmee,
So
what, yeah.
Hold on, Reed. She said,
No,
have a
dude.
seat hold on. She said, have a seat at the table.
I know.
Yeah.
What quote
Did you
does
tell her
remind
that?
you? No, but
Did you talk to her about that?
no. But what does that remind you of our previous guest we had on?
Yes, that's like one of our key things. That's one of our
Yeah.
key things. And so I have a number of things I want to say, but I'll consolidate them. I want to go back to the beginning of this podcast. And Justin was asking you questions about did you learn anything during training about business? And it's designed for you not to. They want to keep you as a physician. But what I will say, they don't want you to have any business knowledge. That's by design. Just so you know, that's by design. If you spend 10 years in school and you can't get 6 months of a base knowledge of business,
you can't read a basic P&L, or you can't create a pro forma. Yeah.
That's insane. If you look at so the key player in healthcare doesn't have knowledge about how the finances of the hospital work, about any of that stuff, right? And that's by design. But I almost want to stay away from that, because every single podcast we hammer CMS cuts, we hammer hospital administration, and our listeners know exactly how we feel about that and where we stand. But this podcast is going to be a breath of fresh air to our listeners to say, okay, we know what all the problems are. Here are some solutions. Here are some opportunities, and here is proof. So I'm just grateful that you were willing to come on and spend your time. You are extremely busy, but you were willing to spend your time sharing your experience, because it's not just a group of business guys saying, you can do this. And not only can you do this, we will help build it for you at DocNation, which we've been working with you on for a number of months now. But you can do it, and here's a really good experience share of that. A seat at the table. Yeah. Give me the name real quick, Justin. Give me the.
I just want to. The phrase is either you have a seat at the table, or you're going to be what?
On the menu.
On the menu.
Old school. Old school physician was such a great one-liner. He's like, you're either going to have a seat at the table, or you're going to be on the menu. And that's just so true. And that's not just true in medicine. That's true in any faction of the United States or the world, really. And so I just don't know any industry that the most important piece is not making the decision. Physicians have no decision-making power now, none. You're not getting paid what you used to get paid in the 1980s and before. There's no autonomy. And so, that's why we're seeing a major increase in inquiries at DocNation, because people are looking to, and there's a bunch of people on the fence. Do I start my own business? How do I do that? Where do I start? And you're right. A lot of physicians play the game of paralysis of analysis. And, it's tough to see that, because it's right on the other side. Your dreams are right on the other side of your fear, and you are proof of that, Rashmee. And we're just grateful for you. Grateful to know you. Grateful to be able to work with you. Go ahead, Justin. You had something else, I think.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you would share with your colleagues or the next generation coming up as they have these thoughts, these ideas, these possibilities, because each of them, they have something unique that they bring to the table. They have their own value they bring that they could ignite. What would be the way you would spark that idea that they have as far as encouraging them? What would you say to yourself as you were thinking about this, as you were kind of like, should I not, going back and forth on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to understand yourself and understand what is your risk tolerance. I mean, and what's sort of think about what is the worst case scenario here. Like, the worst case scenario is you say you're thinking about starting your own practice, or say you're thinking about opening, some sort of new innovative business that isn't run of the mill, or it might be new for your specific specialty. The worst case scenario is like, it's going to fail, right? But at the end of the day, the amount that you learn in the failure is really going to set you up and help you learn how to be successful the next time with the next iteration. And, you always have a backup. Like, having to be a W-2 employee, like, look, at the end of the day, for a lot of people, it's not a bad gig, right? I mean, being a business owner has its own, it's tough, right? It has its own pros and cons. But I think if you recognize in yourself that you have an entrepreneurial spirit and you want to do something, you got to go and just do it, because there's not going to, nobody else is going to do it if you don't do it. So I think that, you as a business owner have a lot more autonomy. You're able to create jobs. Now, remember, like, you're creating jobs for other folks. You're impacting your community. You're setting yourself up as an example for others who are going to follow. And it's better for your patients in terms of outcomes. And I think at the end of the day, it brings a lot more satisfaction. So I know the system, is sort of working against us in a lot of ways, but I think the more of us that are willing to think outside of the box, that is when things start to change, the needle starts to move. And I think from my perspective, clinical research needs to be considered as a way, or as a means of, bringing in maybe an additional stream of revenue, helping you to build your brand within whatever therapeutic area you have expertise in, setting you up, connecting you with pharmaceutical companies so that you're both on the drug development side, but you're also on the post-commercial side as a key opinion leader when you're writing prescriptions. Like, you got to understand how this all works and who the stakeholders are. And I think that the more clinicians get involved in clinical research, you're not only going to make potentially opening your own practice more financially viable, but you're also going to open up access to clinical trials for a lot more patients, which ultimately just improves the speed and efficiency at which we're able to develop new drugs and eventually just innovate for future generations. So I've seen it in liver disease. I'm a specialist in liver disease, but I have colleagues who work in neurology, Alzheimer's disease, a lot of folks doing work in other areas, and it's really rewarding. But again, you got to take that leap of faith. And I would say the only other thing I would counsel people to do is get basic business training. Like, if I look back, I would have wanted to maybe like pick up a basic book, those books that try to condense an MBA into like 90 pages. Like, just pick up a book or two. Try to start to think like an owner. There are a lot of great books out there. And look, we live in an era where there's so much content available to you for free. So podcasts to me became, honestly, like my teachers. So, you can access a lot of great information and learn from a lot of people. And I would say also find a mentor or two. So, if what I'm saying today is like sparking your interest, reach out to me. It's important to try to seek out those people that have done what you envision yourself doing. Say they created a path, and you say, I want that. That sounds really interesting. Like, how did you do it? Give me the tools, or what do I do? How do I even access this type of an opportunity? So find a mentor, super important.
That is so good. And that is such a gracious offer. I'll say it like this. Building a business is like building a baseball team. You're not going to be the first baseman and the shortstop and the catcher and the left fielder. You are good at certain things and certain things, and you bring people in to help bring your dream to life. You are directing and leading. And so that's one thing we talk about at DocNation. And another thing we do is if you are listening to this and you want a business 101 class, we will take you through a 6-week or a 6-month course.
Yeah.
So feel free to reach out to us if you want to get in touch with Rashmee. She just made that offer. And if you're interested in the business course, reach out to us. Rashmee, I'll leave you with this, Justin, unless you want to leave her with one of your questions, but you've gotten a lot of questions in. So can I go?
Yeah, I have. I've kind of taken over here.
I think you've covered this mostly, but in all of your business and clinical experience, what's been your number one favorite thing? What's been the most satisfying thing about business or medicine combined?
So I would say combining the two, clinical research has allowed me to do that. I would first say I found my niche, which is like I know that that's very rare and I feel very blessed. But I love to help people sort of understand how to also access, their best self so that they can also find their niche, right? Like I want every physician to stay in medicine if possible. Like we have so many clinicians that are leaving or dissatisfied, and we need clinicians, we need good doctors.
Yeah.
So I think what I've recognized, your question is like, what was been your most favorite part? And my most favorite part has been recognizing that there actually is a huge opportunity here to help. Like I think that I've gained so much from it that now I'm sort of in this mindset where I really want to be a conduit. Like I want to be a conduit for knowledge, information, path to success, and just try to elevate as many of my colleagues as possible. So I still have a lot to do and I'm still building my brand. That's something, another thing I've really enjoyed, and I'm actually at the beginning of really doing professionally. And that's only because of Reed and Justin did I realize that I can really start to professionalize my brand more. But I'm also really excited to just continue to see what's the next iteration of this. So every physician also needs to understand that they have their own personal brand. So we're all able to bring something unique. And if you can, figure out how to monetize your brand, that's great.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, that's amazing. But you have to also understand that you are a brand. Like what you present is very unique. And how do you find that niche in your specific world?
I'm so glad you brought that up. If college football players, college volleyball players, college basketball players under the NIL, name, image, and likeness, are getting paid to practice and play games, why would a far and away more important group of people, physicians, not be doing the same thing? Write a book, build a website. You are a thought leader. Every one of you are a thought leader. Build that brand. Build your brand. Thank you for sharing that, Rashmee. I don't know if we're going to talk about that, but thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
All of that said, you're still very, very young. So I cannot wait to continue to assist you for a long time to come. And how gracious it was for you to share 45 minutes of your time and your experience with us. And also offer up some leadership to anybody listening who wants this leadership. Rashmee Patil, you are a special human being, and we are grateful for you. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
This has been the DocNation Podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to us. Your feedback really helps us reach more listeners like you. We'd also love to hear your thoughts and any topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for updates, behind-the-scenes content, and to join the conversation. Thanks for listening.